Your sister's housewarming party was so lovely. My mom said, her voice dripping with an almost saccharine sweetness that I'd come to dread. When are you going to catch up? That was the question, the innocent, sounding yet venom-laced barb that finally pushed me over the edge. Was I wrong for what I did next, for finally snapping after years of being compared, diminished, and made to feel utterly worthless in the shadow of my perfect sister? Tell me honestly if you would have done the same thing. It all started, as these things often do, innocently enough. Or at least it felt innocent in the beginning. Growing up, my sister Clara was the golden child. She was 2 years older, effortlessly beautiful, academically brilliant, and socially charming. I, on the other hand, was me. Awkward, a bit clumsy, more interested in books and quiet contemplation than team sports or school dances. Our parents, particularly our mom, never outright said they favored Clara, but their actions, their words, their entire demeanor screamed it from the rooftops. Every achievement of Clara's was celebrated with fanfare, newspaper clippings, and enthusiastic phone calls to every relative on the family tree. My achievements, if they were acknowledged at all, were met with a polite nod and a swift change of subject back to Clara's latest triumph. It built up, a slow, insidious poison that seeped into every corner of my childhood, shaping my self-perception and fostering a deep, simmering resentment that I tried desperately to suppress. I remember one particularly poignant moment when I was about 10. I'd spent weeks working on a complex science fair project, an intricate model of the solar system with working lights and motorized planets. I was so proud I got an honorable mention at the regional fair, a pretty big deal for a 5th grader. When I showed my mom the ribbon, she smiled faintly and said, "That's nice, dear. You know, Clara won 1st place in the district art competition when she was in 4th grade. Her painting of Old Oak Tree was simply breathtaking. The ribbon felt suddenly heavy, worthless in my hand. It wasn't about the ribbon itself, but the message, *You are not enough, and you never will be.* As we grew older, the comparisons became more sophisticated, more insidious. Clara excelled in high school, got a full scholarship to a prestigious university, graduated with honors, and landed a dream job straight out of college. Each step of her journey was meticulously chronicled by my mom, shared with anyone who would listen, and often, quite pointedly, shared with me. Clara's already been promoted again. Isn't that wonderful? Such a go-getter. Did you hear Clara bought her first condo? All on her own, mind you, so responsible. Meanwhile, I struggled. I went to a local state university, worked part-time to pay for my tuition, and eventually landed a decent, if unglamorous, job in marketing. It wasn't Clara's trajectory, and my mom made sure I knew it. Every family gathering became a performance, with Clara as the star and me as the understudy who never quite got her moment in the spotlight. My attempts to share my own successes, however small, were usually met with a dismissive wave, or worse, a comparison that left me feeling diminished. "Oh, that's good, honey. You know, Clara managed a whole team by your age." It felt like a constant psychological assault, a relentless chipping away at my self-esteem. My dad, bless his heart, tried to be more balanced, but he was often overshadowed by my mom's strong personality. He'd occasionally offer a quiet word of encouragement, a knowing look that said, "I see you," but it was never enough to counteract the constant barrage from my mom. Clara herself was complicated. She wasn't outwardly malicious, but she also never seemed to notice the damage being done. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. She accepted the praise, the accolades, the favoritism as her due. Sometimes she'd even join in, offering meaning but ultimately condescending advice about my career choices or my lack of a suitable partner. "You just need to put yourself out there more, sis," she'd say, completely oblivious to the fact that her mere existence made me want to crawl into a cave and never emerge. The housewarming party, oh, the housewarming party! It was the culmination, the straw that broke the camel's back. Clara had bought this absolutely stunning, newly renovated house in a prime neighborhood. It was huge, with a gourmet kitchen, a sprawling backyard, and more bedrooms than she knew what to do with. Of course, my mom had been gushing about it for months. "It's simply divine, darling. Clara has such exquisite taste." I had to go, of course. Family obligations. I walked in, and it was exactly as my mom described: immaculate, stylish, the epitome of adult success. Clara, radiant in a silk dress, greeted me with a polite hug, her eyes already scanning over my shoulder for more important guests. My mom immediately swooped in, tugging me aside. "Isn't it marvelous? And she did it all herself. Managed the renovations, picked out every fixture. She's just so capable." She then lowered her voice conspiratorially. "You know, your Aunt Carol was asking when you're going to settle down and buy your own place. I told her you're still exploring your options." The implication hung heavy in the air. Asterisk, you are behind, you are failing, you are a disappointment. Asterisk, I spent the entire evening forcing a smile, making small talk, and trying to deflect the subtle digs and overt comparisons. Every conversation seemed to circle back to Clara's brilliance, her success, her perfect life. Guests, clearly coached by my mom, would ask me about my little apartment or my entry-level job, always with that patronizing tone that suggested they already knew the answer and were simply performing their part in the charade. I felt like a ghost, a supporting character in someone else's epic tale. By the time I left, my head was throbbing, my chest tight with a familiar ache of inadequacy. I drove home in silence, the weight of years of emotional abuse pressing down on me. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I could continue to internalize the pain, to let their words chip away at me until there was nothing left. Or I could finally, for once, stand up for myself, even if it meant disrupting the carefully constructed facade of our family. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have kept quiet, or would you have said something? The next day the phone call came. It was my mom, naturally. "Your sister's housewarming party was so lovely," she said, her voice lilting. "It was just perfect, wasn't it? She worked so hard." And then the killer blow, delivered with that same infuriating sweetness. "When are you going to catch up?" The question wasn't truly a question. It was a statement, a final pronouncement of my perpetual inferiority. Something inside me snapped. Years of suppressed anger, hurt, and frustration boiled over. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in my life, I spoke my truth, unfiltered. "Catch up, Mom. Catch up to what? To a life that was handed to her on a silver platter because she fit your perfect mold. To a life where every single one of her achievements was magnified, and mine were ignored or dismissed. You want to know when I'm going to catch up. I'm never going to catch up, Mom, because I'm not running the same race. I'm not Clara, and frankly, I don't want to be." My voice, though trembling, was firm. I could hear her sharp intake of breath on the other end. I continued, the words spilling out, a dam finally breaking. "You know what was lovely about Clara's housewarming? The fact that I had to sit there for 3 hours, listening to you and half the guests implicitly and explicitly tell me how much of a failure I am compared to her. Every single time I try to talk about something good happening in my life, you change the subject back to Clara. Every single time. Do you have any idea what that does to a person, to always feel like the less? Then the afterthought, the mistake." There was a stunned silence on the other end, something I had never experienced with my mom before. She was never speechless. "Don't you dare speak to me like that," she finally sputtered, her voice rising in pitch. "I am your mother. All I've ever done is try to encourage you, to push you to be your best." "No, Mom," I countered, my voice growing stronger. "All you've ever done is push me to be Clara, and I'm done. I'm done trying to be someone I'm not. I'm done trying to earn your approval by being a carbon copy of my sister. My life is my own, and it might not be as shiny and perfect as Clara's in your eyes, but it's asterisk mine asterisk, and I'm proud of it. I work hard. I'm a good person. I have friends who love me for who I am, and if that's not good enough for you, then maybe you should just keep focusing on Clara." I paused, gathering my breath, feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and terror. "And honestly, Mom," I added, my voice softening slightly, but with an underlying steel. I need a break from this, from the comparisons, from the constant judgment. I need to figure out who I am without your expectations dictating my worth. So I think it's best if we don't talk for a while. Then I did something I never, ever thought I would do. I hung up the phone, not slammed it, but simply ended the call. The silence in my apartment was deafening, but it was also peaceful. The aftermath was exactly what I expected, and yet also surprisingly liberating. My mom called back immediately, her voice alternating between furious and tearful, accusing me of being ungrateful, selfish, and a terrible daughter. I didn't answer. She texted, then Clara started texting me, expressing her concern and asking what was going on, implying I was being overly sensitive. I briefly explained to Clara that I needed space from the constant comparisons, and she reacted with feigned shock, saying she never meant to make me feel that way. I knew, deep down, that she probably genuinely didn't understand the depth of the wound, or maybe she just didn't want to. I reiterated my need for space and muted our family chat. The silence that followed was initially unsettling. My phone, usually buzzing with family updates or thinly veiled critiques, was quiet, but then a strange sense of calm settled over me. I started focusing more on my own life, my own goals, my own friendships. I took up a new hobby, started working out more regularly, and found a renewed sense of purpose in my career. I realized how much emotional energy I had been expending trying to gain my mother's approval, energy that was now free to be invested in myself. Months passed. My mom eventually reached out again, a little softer, a little less demanding. The initial calls were still tinged with passive aggression, but I held my ground, gently but firmly stating that I wouldn't engage in conversations that made me feel less than. It was a slow, arduous process, but over time the dynamic began to shift, ever so subtly. My mom still talks about Clara, of course, but now when she tries to make a comparison, I politely but firmly steer the conversation back to my own life, or I simply change the subject. And sometimes, just sometimes, she actually listens. It's not perfect, and the scars are still there, but I finally feel like I have a voice, a presence in my own life. I reclaimed my sense of self, and that, to me, is the greatest achievement of all, so that's my story. It's been a long journey, full of frustration and heartache, but also, ultimately, a journey towards self-acceptance. If you've ever felt like you're living in someone else's shadow or constantly being compared, know that you're not alone. And know that you have the right to define your own worth, like this video if you were on my side and understood why I finally snapped. Subscribe for more stories like this, where we talk about the messy, complicated, and sometimes liberating truths of life. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.